In the early morning hours of February 16th, 2003, a red Peugeot zipped down the highway, supposedly being chased by Belgian police. Inside the car were two men racing toward the Italian border through France. They weren't just going for a joyride. They had just pulled off a heist worth over $100 million, and shockingly, they did it all with the help of a pen. At least, they believed the Belgian authorities were hot on their tail. But the reality was a bit more complicated. It wasn't the police. In fact, this entire situation was a result of one tiny miscalculation that unraveled a meticulously crafted plan. What followed was a dramatic chain of events tied to one of the largest diamond robberies in Belgian history. Rewind a few months earlier to what seemed like a regular day in September 2002. In Antwerp's renowned diamond district, a man named Leonardo Notarbartolo casually walked into the vault area of the Diamond Center. He accessed a locker, pulled out some documents, and began signing them. But something was off. He took far too long, his pen strokes aimless, more like random scribbles in a signature. And there was a reason for that. That pen wasn't just a pen. Hidden inside was a tiny spy camera, discreetly capturing every angle and detail of the vault's interior, its layout, the security mechanisms, everything. Once he was done, Leonardo slid the papers back inside, closed the locker, and calmly walked out like nothing had happened. Over the next few months, he kept repeating this act, each visit giving him more footage, more insights. Day after day, he studied the vault's routines, tracked activity hours, and learned the facility's habits. At the same time, he seamlessly blended into the community, making friends with fellow diamond traders, earning their trust. But how did a man like Leonardo gain access to such a high-security vault in the first place? That part of the story goes back 3 years. In the fall of 2000, Leonardo arrived in Antwerp with a business plan, or at least that's what he told people. He hopped in a taxi and headed straight to the Diamond District, just a short distance from the central train station. There, he stepped into the prestigious World Diamond Center, introduced himself as an Italian diamond dealer, and said he wanted to open a local office. The front desk clerk asked for the usual paperwork: business credentials, licenses, work permits, and after verifying everything checked out, they approved his request. He officially became a tenant of the building and, with that, gained access to one of the most secure vaults in the world, hidden 2 floors beneath the street level. Within days, he got his office up and running. He hired a couple of employees and began operating what looked like a legitimate diamond business. Thanks to his natural charm and persuasive personality, he quickly built strong relationships with other dealers. He became a regular at local bars and late-night gatherings, and even managed to befriend some of the district security personnel. But it was all part of the plan, a carefully constructed persona. Leonardo wasn't there to trade gems. He was there to blend in, to become invisible, to earn trust in a community where million-dollar deals often went down over nothing more than a handshake. He knew that stealing millions in diamonds wasn't a job one man could do alone. Even with insider access, it would be impossible to pull it off without help. So after 2 years of laying the groundwork, he reached out to his old friend in Italy and started assembling a crew. Leonardo continued to build his reputation, regularly mingling with prominent diamond dealers, attending late-night parties, and even forming friendly relationships with local law enforcement and the security teams that guarded the district around the clock. But all of that, every smile, every handshake, every casual drink, was part of an elaborate act. It was a carefully constructed illusion designed to make him look like just another respected member of Antwerp's tight-knit diamond community. You see, the Diamond District operated on something more valuable than the gems it sold. Trust. Multi-million-dollar deals were often struck with nothing more than a few words and a handshake. And Leonardo, who had a deep understanding of human behavior and social cues, knew that earning real trust in a place like this would take time. But even then, he was aware of a cold truth. No matter how well-connected he became, he couldn't just walk into the vault, load up on diamonds, and stroll out without raising alarms. Eventually, he understood that to pull off a heist of this magnitude, he couldn't do it alone. So after nearly 2 years of carefully laying the groundwork, he decided it was time to assemble a team that could help turn his vision into reality. Leonardo returned to Turin, Italy, and called up an old friend, Pietro Tavano, also known by his nickname, Speedy. They met face to face, and Leonardo laid it all out. He shared his plan to rob the Diamond District and asked for Speedy's help. Speedy, who was naturally anxious and cautious, nearly laughed at the absurdity of it all. He told Leo straight up that the idea was crazy and could ruin their lives. But Leonardo wasn't joking. He calmly explained that this wasn't just a wild scheme. It was a plan he'd been crafting for nearly 2 years, meticulous, detailed, and fully thought out. Eventually, 2 more recruits joined the team, Fernando Finato, nicknamed the Monster, and Elio Denorio, who everyone called Genius. Together, the 4 formed the core of what would become one of the most skilled and dangerous heist crews in modern history. Leonardo walked Genius through every inch of the Diamond District's layout, what he had seen, what he had learned, how the security teams operated. He asked Genius to come up with a way to secretly gather even more data inside the building, something that wouldn't arouse suspicion. Genius had just a thing, a custom-built pen, equipped with a miniature spy camera. It would be subtle enough to carry around without raising eyebrows, but powerful enough to capture precise footage of camera locations, guard patrols, and the tech used to protect the vault. However, Leo pointed out another problem. Each safe deposit box had a physical lock that required an actual key. To bypass that, they would need someone with special skills. So they added 1 more man to the crew, an older gentleman known only as the King of Keys, a master locksmith who could forge any key for any type of lock. Now 5 strong and each an expert in their craft, the group proudly began calling themselves the School of Turin. Just a few days after joining the team Genius, the crew's tech wizard came through with the goods. He crafted a custom-made pen with a hidden spy camera neatly tucked inside the top. Once it was ready, he handed it off to Leonardo. Leonardo returned to Antwerp, slipped the spy pen into his jacket pocket, and got right back into his role as a diamond merchant. But this time, every visit he made to the vault wasn't just routine, it was reconnaissance. With the pen discreetly recording, he walked through the facility regularly, collecting critical footage of the high-end military-grade security systems in place. He didn't stop there. Leonardo made a point of roaming the Diamond District, both during peak hours and during the quieter moments of the day. He studied the patterns, when the guards changed shifts where the cameras were pointed, how often the patrols passed. He observed everything. After almost 2 months of quietly gathering video, he turned over the footage to Genius for analysis. At first, it seemed like everything was going to plan, but Genius quickly realized there was a problem. Sure, the footage provided a clear picture of the vault's structure and layout, but it was missing one crucial detail: the electrical wiring. Without that information, they risked triggering alarms during the heist. It was a critical gap they couldn't afford to ignore. So Genius called Leonardo and urged him to get his hands on the facility's blueprints. And Leonardo, ever the smooth talker, knew just how to pull it off. He returned to the vault's management and told them he was planning some renovations in his office space. He explained that contractors would need access to the building's blueprints to avoid disrupting sensitive electrical systems during the work. The request sounded legitimate, and without hesitation, the management handed over not just a general layout, but also detailed schematics of the vault itself. With those blueprints in hand, the School of Turin now had everything they needed. What happened next even took Leonardo by surprise. By the end of December 2002, Genius contacted him again. He told Leo to take some extended time off and return to Turin immediately. There was something important he wanted to show him in person. Leonardo didn't ask questions. He closed up his office, packed his bags, and took his girlfriend, Adriana Crudo, with him back to Italy. After arriving in Turin, Genius picked him up and drove him to a remote, abandoned warehouse. Inside, Leonardo was greeted by the entire crew, Speedy the Monster and the King of Keys. But what truly stunned him was what they had built. Sitting in the middle of that dusty old warehouse was a full-scale replica of the vault door from the Diamond District. Covered with a tarp until the reveal, it was a perfect reproduction down to the last detail. Leonardo was speechless. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. The School of Turin had gone above and beyond anything he imagined. Genius, clearly proud of his work, explained every aspect of the replica's functionality. He even joked, "They don't call me genius for nothing." Genius wasn't exaggerating. He truly lived up to his nickname. The entire crew started training with the replica vault immediately, day and night. They practiced tirelessly, learning the ins and outs of the vault's tech systems, figuring out exactly what could trigger alarms, and identifying every little mistake they needed to avoid when a real job went down. Once they were confident in their skills, the team packed up and made their way back to Antwerp. 1 week before the planned heist, all members arrived and regrouped at Leonardo's apartment. There, they made their final preparations and locked in the date, February 15th, 2003. It was the ideal moment to strike. Being a weekend, the Diamond District would see low trading activity and reduced security presence. The day before the heist, Leonardo headed back into the vault under the guise of routine business. But this time, he wasn't just dropping off papers. Hidden in his pocket was a small can of women's hairspray. During their practice runs, they had discovered a clever trick. Spraying this hairspray over heat and motion sensors would coat them in an oily film, temporarily disabling their ability to detect body heat or movement. Leonardo sprayed the sensors discreetly, conducted one final inspection of the space, and quietly exited the building. That evening, Ferdinando, the monster, went out to a nearby restaurant and picked up a spread of food, pasta, salami sandwiches, salads, and a few bottles of wine. The entire team came together at Leonardo's place one last time, sharing a low-key celebratory dinner ahead of the big night. Then came the evening of February 15th. Around 11 p.m., the crew gathered just outside the security post of the Diamond District. They waited patiently for one of the 2 patrol units to finish their shift and leave, which would reduce the number of active guards and give them a better chance to slip in unnoticed. As they stood in the shadows, Speedy started to crack under pressure. He began fidgeting, muttering that he had a bad feeling about the whole operation. But Leonardo, calm and focused, reassured him. He reminded the crew that the building was empty, and they had prepared for this moment in painstaking detail. They knew exactly how to bypass every alarm and disable each sensor. By midnight, the entire district had gone quiet. All lights were off, with Speedy staying behind as a getaway driver. The rest of the team moved into action. They approached the rear side of the Diamond Center building, climbed over a small garden wall, and set up a ladder that led to a rear balcony. Genius carefully took out a small polyester bag and covered the infrared sensor mounted on the side of the balcony to avoid triggering any intrusion alerts. Once that was done, they pried open a glass window and climbed inside, one by one. From there, they made their way to the elevator and descended 2 stories into the basement where the vault was located. The elevator door slid open, and the crew stepped into the pitch-black basement. Exactly as expected. According to building protocol, all lights shut off automatically after hours. What made it tricky, though, was that any unexpected light in this area would instantly trigger an alarm. But the team had trained for this. They had practiced it over and over, even blindfolded, so they knew precisely where each sensor and camera was located. Working with absolute precision, they moved to cover the light sensor detectors, so the system wouldn't notice when they eventually turned on the lights. Once everything was blocked, one of the crew members flipped on the corridor lights inside the vault area. Then Genius got to work. From his bag, he pulled out a small aluminum plate with adhesive strips and attached it to the vault door. Next, he carefully removed one of the magnetic proximity sensors, but did it in such a way that the magnetic field would remain unbroken, even when the door opened. This was a critical move that allowed them to bypass the magnetic alarm system undetected. After installing the plate, Leonardo switched the lights off again and keyed in the vault's access code. The massive armored door swung wide open. But they weren't done yet. Behind that door was a second layer of security, a thick steel gate. Fortunately, the crew had already discovered that a long utility key, conveniently stored in a nearby wall-mounted box, could unlock it easily. They turned the key, opened the gate, and entered the vault. Inside, they methodically began disabling the remaining sensors. They used plastic bags to cover every camera and motion detector. Once the room was secured, the King of Keys stepped up. Using a handcrafted tool, he began unlocking each safe deposit box, one by one. In total, they made off with over $100 million worth of diamonds, cash, stocks, gem certificates, and high-value jewelry, without triggering a single alarm. Before leaving, Leonardo took one last precaution. He removed all the VHS tapes from the facility's CCTV system to erase any evidence of their presence. Once everything was packed and ready, the crew rushed down a narrow back street, exiting the secure zone of the Diamond District, where Speedy waited in the getaway car. They piled in, and Speedy floored it, racing back to Leonardo's apartment. There, they split up the loot equally among themselves. Adriana, Leonardo's girlfriend, joined the others in making a clean exit from Antwerp. Only Leonardo and Speedy stayed behind to clean up the last traces of the operation. They gathered any leftover food, trash, and evidence, threw it all into garbage bags, and loaded them into the car. Then, without wasting time, they hit the road, heading toward the Italian border. But somewhere along the highway, things took a dramatic turn. Speedy glanced at the rearview mirror and froze. He was convinced he saw flashing lights, police cars, and even helicopters tailing them. Panic kicked in. He started yelling that they were being chased. Leonardo tried to calm him down, assuring him it was all in his head. "There's no one behind us," he insisted. "It's just your nerves." Leonardo kept telling Speedy that he was imagining things. There were no flashing lights, no helicopters. It was just paranoia messing with his head. But Speedy wasn't listening. In a complete panic, he slammed the brakes in the middle of an empty highway. Not another car or person in sight. He jumped out of the vehicle, yanked the trash bags from the back seat, and started tossing them into the bushes. Everything that could possibly link them to the heist. Surveillance tapes, receipts, food wrappers, gone in seconds. Leonardo was furious. He tried to stop him, even hit him, shouting that it was a stupid move. But it was too late. The damage was done, and there was no way they could collect all again. So they cut their losses and sped off into the night, crossing the border into Italy. Back in Antwerp, on the Monday after the heist, panic erupted. The Diamond District reopened as usual, only to find the vault compromised. Word spread fast. How could one of the most secure facilities on Earth, protected by military-grade systems, be broken into so easily? As investigators scrambled for answers, fate intervened. Just a few days later, a man named August Van Camp was walking through his private property when he noticed trash dumped along the trail. Van Camp was a dedicated nature lover who often reported litterers to the authorities. But this time, what he found wasn't just an environmental offense. It was a gold mine for the police. Among the trash were scraps of paper from the Diamond Center, a few loose gems, VHS tapes, receipts, and even a half-eaten salami sandwich. He immediately called the police. When investigators arrived and sifted through the garbage, it didn't take long to piece things together. They found Leonardo's official work order for the vault, linking him directly to the break-in. DNA from the discarded sandwich also confirmed his presence. A restaurant receipt tied Fernando the Monster to the food they ate before the heist. A business card connected Genius to his role as a technician from Turin. Fingerprints on the trash matched Speedy, and even his SIM card location data placed him at the scene during the crime. Within days, all four men were caught and put on trial for their involvement in the massive heist. Adriana Crudo, Leonardo's girlfriend, was also arrested under suspicion that she helped forge documents for him. As for the King of Keys, he vanished without a trace. No real name, no location, no evidence. He simply disappeared. And of the $100 million in stolen goods, only a few $1,000s worth of gems were ever recovered from the trash. The rest? Still out there, hidden, waiting to be found.